So I'd just like to welcome everyone for joining us today. This is the second webinar that we have in our Spotlight series on research impact today. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the land that we're meeting on. Obviously, there'll be different lands that we're all on today, but in the Adelaide CBD, we're on Kaurna land. So I just want to acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region. We recognise the Kaurna people's cultural, spiritual, physical and emotional connection with their land. And we honour and pay respects to Kaurna elders, both past and present, and all generations of Kaurna people now and in the future. And now I've just realised I need to share my slides. So today's webinar, we're very, very grateful and fortunate to be hearing from Dr. Tobias Schoep and Tara McLaren, and also Dr. Anne-Maree Dowd. Tobias and Tara will be outlining the development of the AAMRI Research Impact Framework. For those of us that don't know what AAMRI stands for, it's the Association of Australian Medical Research Institutes. So Tobias and Tara led the development of this framework, and as chairs of the National AAMRI Research Impact Working Group. They'll share insights into the process of developing such a framework and how it can be used by researchers and research organisations to review and evaluate their impact across a variety of domains. Anne-Maree Dowd will then detail the CSIRO Impact Framework, reflecting on the benefits and challenges of developing an organisation-specific framework to evaluate impact. Now, just a little reminder to everyone dialing in today, we do have two other presentations in this series of webinars. So one next Monday and next Friday. So we hope that you can join us for those final two presentations as well. Just before we begin today, I just wanted to share a little bit of information about Health Translation SA. So as the slide says, we exist to accelerate the translation of research findings into practice and policy. We're very fortunate and very grateful for the support of our 11 partners who are listed on the bottom of the slide. We work with these partners and other stakeholders as an independent catalyst. So we're very, I guess, very fortunate that we can work with lots of different organisations across lots of different areas to mobilise collaborations to really address priority health challenges and areas of unmet need to ensure that research is translated into practice and policy. Now, we've recently launched our new strategy, which can be found on our website, and anyone who's interested, I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. I won't go through this slide in too much detail, apart from just highlighting that we really focus on 4 key objectives. So we're focusing on bringing the right people together, working or supporting the right projects to get done, building the right environment, and then really celebrating and showcasing impact, which is really what this Spotlight series is about. And finally, what we really, I guess, encourage is for people to consider research impact as a mindset. So it's really, I guess, important to think about when you're undertaking research to have the end in mind when you begin, and really think about how your research is going to impact upon health outcomes. And I'm sure that we'll hear more about that today and in future presentations. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Tobias and Tara. The way we'll run the session today is that after Tobias and Tara have presented, we'll have a short question and answer period, and then Anne-Maree will present, and then similarly we'll have a question and answer period for her session as well. But if you do have anything that pops into your mind as our presenters are speaking, please just pop your questions into the Q&A in the chat section, and then we'll be able to address those. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop my screen share now, Tobias, and I think you should be able to take over.
So I should be able to share my screen. Screen share, great. All right. Okay. Share. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you for having us. So I'm Tobias, an Honorary Research Associate of Health and Kids and the General Manager of Grow Impact. And I'm here today with Tara, who's the current co-chair actually with Ken Knight from MCRI of the AAMRI Research Impact Working Group. So I'm going to give a little bit of background again, because there might be some people that are new to the conversation about why talking impact is so important. It's really the language that we use to communicate amongst ourselves and with our important stakeholders about how we're improving the world as well as ourselves. And a lot of people actually care about this information. I mean, if you're a researcher, you've got your research group, your institution, but you also have a lot of external stakeholders as well, such as your donors, industry organizations, that want to know about what you're doing, because ultimately they want to help support you do your research. And talking impact, you know, sometimes it's been seen as a bit of a dirty word, but it is reasonable to expect that when people support organizations, that they understand what you're doing. And so they want to know that they expect a return for the something that you're doing. And that something is always changing and depends on the stakeholder. If they're mission driven, then it's actually getting closer to their end goal. But then it may be something entirely different. If they're, for example, knowledge driven, it might be publications. And we need to let them know what we're doing. And we have a choice here to say, look, we're just going to provide them with the information we think that they need or they ask for, or we're going to talk about the best things that we do. We want to talk about a more broader impact journey of our research rather than just what they're asking for. Now, the challenge with this is that researchers get into research for any different reasons sometimes than the stakeholders. And so your driver might be curiosity, it might be the challenge, but the stakeholder might be mission driven and they just want to know how you're getting close to end goal. So aligning those expectations is really important. But there are some challenges of research that make that alignment expectations really challenging. Research takes a long time. We know it takes sometimes 10 to 15 years to get from bench to bedside. And often the best outcomes actually come from tangents. They're not the things that we plan to do. And we require significant investment throughout this research process as well. So this creates a really unique environment where it's sometimes challenging to align those expectations. So deciding how we're going to talk about impact is actually the first step in allowing us to communicate effectively and manage the expectations of our research organizations as well as our external stakeholders. And frameworks are really just one way to understand impact. We really have a number of measures, starting with metrics, so those how many publications did you produce, how much funding, but it goes all the way to the case studies, such as telling stories and getting testimonials from your key stakeholders. And these vary from being very quantitative to being very qualitative measures. And a framework sort of fits somewhere in the metrics and evaluation space. So it's what you've done, but also the results of those evaluations of your research that come out. And frameworks are really important. They're not something to be worried about because they actually can give value to your whole research journey Even if you only work in that very basic discovery research space, they help you give value to that, as well as when you hand the baton over to other people that might be doing, I suppose, other parts of that research journey. So we can give value to knowledge, decision-making and building capacity, as well as those health, economic and society impacts as well. And so what is research impact in Australia? The NHMRC is the definition that we've used. It's verifiable outcomes that research makes changes to knowledge, health, economy and society. And if you look at the AAMRI framework, which Tara's about to talk about in a moment, we actually build on that to say, look, our researchers are making really important changes by informing decision-making within, for example, health service providers, or build capacity through training the next generation of students as well. So it's the NHMRC framework and a little bit more to give value to all the activities that you're involved in. So I'm just going to hand over to Tara now. She's going to talk a little bit about the AAMRI Research Impact Framework project and a little bit around the outcomes of that project.
Thanks, Tobias. So the AAMRI Research Impact Project was a 3-year project that was very generously funded by the Ian Potter Foundation and came out of lots of conversations through the AAMRI networks around how we could be better coordinated, around how we talked about and how we understood research impact. So the project started, I think, in 2016, got some funding in 2017, and we finally delivered our report to everybody last year. So if you haven't seen that report, check it out online and we can send through a link at the end. So as Rebecca mentioned at the beginning, what is AAMRI? So AAMRI is really the peak body for medical research institutes across Australia. There's 58 member institutes, ranging from very small institutes to really large institutes that are more like a faculty in a university. So AAMRI is responsible for advocating for high-level policy reforms. They're also a trusted source of information, and they help build the profile of the sector, particularly unique for the MRI sector, and they support and connect members across Australia. So we had a number of people contribute to our working group to the design and delivery of the project. So we had representatives from QIMR, from Telethon Kids, AAMRI, META, CMRI, MCRI, and Diamantina. So we had a number of people who were on the working group. And we had a fantastic researcher, postdoc, Alana, who coordinated the project and made sure that we all kept to our milestones and our deliverable and kept the scope, in range. And she has helped us put the report together and continues to be part of our group moving forward. So what is our framework design? So our framework design really focuses on, Tobias said, the activities and evaluation space of research impact, and really focuses on 2 main things, which is activity-based indicators and practices that support research impact. Yeah, so our metric-based framework is based on these research activities and practices. We did look around the world at what was existing in other jurisdictions, and we decided that we would start off not from scratch, but we would base our framework on the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, but better understand that framework for the Australian context. So we designed this through participation of the sector using a Delphi process, which is a participatory research process where we set a threshold of 80% consensus in order to have something included in the framework. We did also include in our report the activity indicators that did not reach consensus, because while they maybe don't have broad applicability across the sector, for some individual research and organisations, they may continue to be important. And it's important to note that over half of the MRIs in Australia participated in this process, as well as a number of external stakeholder groups. So what did our research impact framework show us? So we have the 6 categories of research impact that Tobias mentioned earlier. So the 4 that you would be familiar through the ARC and NHMRC, with the additional categories of research capacity building and informing decision making. And across those 6 categories, we came up with 81 indicators that reached consensus. And as you can see in each section of the wheel on the right-hand side, there's a number of indicators per broad area. So we had metrics such as peer-reviewed publication in top 10% journals in the field, workshops developed, research-informed development of and/or changes to guidelines, improved ability to access health services, clinical practice changes informed by research. So it really did represent a broad range of research disciplines across the sector. So just a quick summary of the framework, and you can download the report and have a look at it in detail. And we are currently writing up some of the project for a publication, peer review publication. So really this is our first step towards developing a common language for understanding the impact of the medical research sector in Australia. We really recognise that research institutions want to be impactful and that we really do value these broad types of impact. The framework is not intended to be a stick, but a tool for supporting impactful research and really giving researchers an opportunity to place them in this impact research landscape. We do recognise that the framework isn't just a plug and play. It will need to be adapted and configured for different organisations and purposes. And like I said, it was released in May last year. So really what we're looking for is to improve consensus around the language that we use across the sector. And Tobias and I have been really pleased with some of the conversations we've been having, not only internal to our MRI sector, but also across our range of stakeholders. So conversations with, for example, the Victorian Department of Health, the WA Department of Health, some external funding organisations, to say how can we use this framework to better achieve consistency across the sector, particularly around some of these activity indicators where we don't want to be collecting data from multiple purposes using, multiple variations of one indicator. So I think this is a really good first step in starting that conversation, having organisations decide how they're going to apply this, and then do quite a bit of learning as we're going. So we're really excited to be contributing to conversations such as this, where we can understand some of the difficulties that people are facing, some of the challenges that they're facing, and then as they begin to apply frameworks in their own context, some of their experiences. So if you'd like to learn more, you can actually just type in AAMRI Research Impact Framework into your search engine. You should be able to find a recording of the launch and a copy of the report there. We're also developing a community of practice for medical research institutes, and as we go forward with that community of practice, we will be inviting a broader range of stakeholders into those conversations. So if you're interested in finding out more about what we're doing, please keep in touch with us.
So just some key learnings. If your organisation is developing a framework, there's no need to really reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of research out there, particularly in the UK and Canada. And I think the take home from this is that impact isn't a dirty word. When we talk about frameworks, they include what are called impact indicators, and they give value to the whole research journey if you're a basic biomedical researcher or someone working in the clinic or a health services research. And really importantly, when you're talking about impact, involve your internal and external stakeholders in your decisions. Do you and they think impact is the same thing? And as a first step, make sure that you agree that you're talking in the same language, and that's what a framework enables you to do. And Australia is still relatively early in this discussion around how we value research beyond publications. So you don't need to feel rushed in going to a framework. Actually, a lot of people come thinking, oh, we should adopt a framework, but really the first step is to decide, how do you want to use it? What is your strategy? What are you trying to build and where are you trying to go? And the framework really informs how you communicate that and improve that strategy as you go forward. And there's always the opportunity to be proactive about your learning. There's a burgeoning community of practice around in the growing practice space, whether it's through AAMRI or AAMRI and other peak organisations, where you can go and learn more about what's happening with research impact. So we're talking about frameworks today, but is a framework really enough? Our stakeholders want to understand what we're doing in our research. They want to understand how we're progressing our research, but how can we practically make frameworks work? And I think the first step in implementing a framework is really around mission and strategy. Just deciding or being able to articulate for yourself, where do I want to go? What am I trying to do? And then to say, why am I doing this? Why do I want to use a framework? Is it just for advocacy? Or do I want to improve my accountability? Or do I want to understand reasons for success and failure? What information is important for you and relevant for you and your stakeholders is very important to understand as well. And of course, how we're also going to collect this information and communicate this information with the outside world, and to use simple systemized processes for doing that as well. So it minimises the burden on researchers going forward. So if you'd like to learn more about this work and what we're doing, feel free to email myself or Tara. And thank you very much for your time today. And I think we've hopefully got a few minutes left for questions.
Absolutely, we do. We've got a few questions that have come through on the chat, but just thought I might open it up to everyone who's actually online and just see whether anyone just might like to unmute themselves and yeah, pose some questions to our speakers.
No questions? Great.
Not
Sorry,
so
I think
fast.
someone started drilling in the background here too, so I hear a little buzz. Excuse me. Yeah.
Well, I've got some questions. I guess, well, first of all, thank you very much for sharing those insights. I think it's really valuable to understand how you went about that from, I guess, obviously, you know, a very broad, you know, large scale impact framework. I guess I'm thinking perhaps some of our attendees might be, you know, not thinking quite so large. They might be thinking about their own research project or program of research. Do you have any advice around how someone or a team might approach it for their own research program rather than sort of across the whole institution?
I think it's actually in terms of developing a framework or, yeah.
I think maybe not so much a framework, but choosing indicators or deciding on, okay, what is realistically, how could we define our impact and then how do we measure that?
I think there's a combination of things. When we talk about frameworks, they're really around the metric side of things and the results of evaluation. We also have case studies and narrative, and I think stories are still a really important part of what we do. I think the first part of that is really understanding what your goal is as a research team, and that doesn't need to be individual project goals. It's the high-level goal and mission, and then understanding possibly the high-level steps that you need to achieve to get there, and what are going to be the key indicators that you're achieving those steps. Because when you communicate with the outside world, whether it's your internal stakeholders in your institute or your external funders, if you're being proactive about that conversation, you want to be able to talk about how you're progressing the journey and back that up with evidence, okay? So it's still always in the context of that bigger picture of what's actually happening in the research. The framework really allows you to evidence that and give value to your different parts of the research journey, whether it's producing a publication or whether it's producing a guideline or changing a policy in a hospital. So in terms of selecting those measures, it's really going to be bespoke for each research team, depending on what you're doing, the type of research you're doing, but importantly, how you want to communicate with the outside world as well. Tara might have some comments on that too.
Yeah, so I think where the framework can be really useful is a document to actually do a bit of self-reflection as a team and say, here are some activity indicators that the sector has broadly agreed are aligned with these research categories. Are they things that align with what we want to achieve and what we want to do? And should we be doing them? And there's no right or wrong answer to that, because as Tobias said, it's appropriate for your context and your project. But we have had a couple of examples where people have looked at that framework and they've thought, wow, should I actually be doing something in this space? Should I actually be contributing to the capacity building of clinicians in the hospital prior to even looking at policy change? So what I think it can be really useful for is a little bit of self-reflection as a team. And as Tobias sort of alluded to earlier, we really value the philosophy that research is a team science. And I think actually doing this as a team and taking a team-based approach to those activities and recognising that not everybody in a team has to contribute equally to all of those activities is really important.
Thank you. I think that's a really great